Hello everybody, welcome to this week's Q&A, office hours, live chat, question and answers, whatever we want to call it this week. I will do my best to answer your sales, business, life questions. The way these chats work is every Thursday, sometimes a Wednesday. Most Thursdays I jump on, we're on LinkedIn, we're on YouTube. If you're a part of Simple Academy, you can see this video inside the Academy as well, and I will answer your questions. The way this usually works is I will answer the questions from Made Simple Academy students first, and then if you're watching this live on one of these other platforms, drop your questions in the chat below this video, and I will do my best to answer your questions as well. Okay, so let's not faff around. Let's get right into it. The first question comes from my man Adam. It says, with reference to the scientific method, specifically in the Cadence framework, what would you class as the minimum amount of outreach before making tweaks? In other framework examples are 100 emails, so would you consider running 100 prospects for a full cadence for a decent starting point? Okay, third question. Let's break this down for people who are not Made Simple Academy members, and this might help you as well, Adam, as we break through this. So if I pull up the whiteboard of, what can we call it? The whiteboard of truth and justice. Scientific method, dead simple, right? We're going to make a hypothesis, we're going to do an experiment to get data, and then we're going to use this to refine over time our hypothesis. We're going to hypothesize that our prospects like a specific subject line. We're going to put the subject line into the marketplace. We're going to get feedback from the market, whether people open the email, didn't open the email, and then we can change that subject line if it sucked and didn't perform. And we can not change it if it does perform great. And then we move on to, in the idea of cadences, where you have number of plays, right? So each one of these might be a phone call, and that might be a voicemail, and that might be an email, and that makes up one part of your cadence. Then you move on to the next part of cadence on perhaps day 1, day 3. So yes, you're right. You want to test each part of your cadence over time, Adam, but you can't test more than one variable in an instant. So when we're talking about 100 emails to test the subject line and the copy, whether anyone replies to your email, that is fundamentally sound. 100 emails is a good number to go at. That is, you kind of get into the point of actual significance in the data then. Really, we want to be doing 1,000 emails to really pull data from this. If we were doing this on a large scale, if this was a friggin' medical drug trial or something like that, we'd want to be doing many thousands, right, to make sure that the statistical significance of our results are high. But in our instance here with sales cadences, where the worst thing that happens is somebody gets an email that we don't open, our risk of a negative effect of this and leveraging the scientific method here is relatively low. So I would suggest you want to track every phone call, voicemail, the emails that you're sending, and you can do this just by creating a spreadsheet. You don't need to go and overcomplicate any of this, right? You can have a spreadsheet with each of these touch points in a line, broken up into different groups for different days of activities. And obviously this can go on indefinitely, depending on how long you see value in prospecting people, deal size, the market size, that kind of thing. And yeah, I'd be looking for 100 touch points on each one of these before you make a radical decision as to whether the email sucks, you need to get rid of it, or it's worth continuing with. Now, if you've sent 98 emails and you've got no responses, or you've had a couple of angry people respond to you, or even worse, you've sent 10 emails and had 10 angry responses, use your common sense on this, right? Don't force the numbers where common sense prevails, but obviously, if you're unsure, keep pushing until you have certainty. I think that's the best way to describe it. Okay, the second part of your question, Adam. Also, related to the above, I can't remember if it's in the framework, but you said your own cadence is now converting 60% of your target prospects into diagnosis calls. How many tweaks did you make to that cadence over time, and what volume of data are those decisions being made upon? Okay, I will go back to this and we'll see how do I remove all these notes actually. Let's restart. So, for anyone who isn't familiar, Adam's been through this process. I think if you signed up with Made Simple Academy in the past year or so, we create content, push people then to a call. We call this a diagnosis call. It's a sales call, but I'm also adding value. We're finding what people are, where people want to be, what's stopping them going from one place to another, and then we position Seller Made Simple Academy and the workshops and the training and the community and the one-on-one calls and all this good stuff as the vehicle to get them from one side to another. There's value in the call itself intrinsically because a lot of people don't know where they want to be, and a lot of people have never taken the time to work out where they are right now. So there's value in the call. People enjoy being on what is a discovery call, a prospecting call for us, a qualifying call. People enjoy being on them and get value out of them. So it's win-win for everyone. So we get people on the call. And then if they're a good fit, we make an offer. And some people we make an offer to and they say yes. Some people they say no. Or really, it's not right now. The people, obviously, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people consume our content every single month. We get around 700,000 downloads on the audio podcast, anywhere from 50 to kind of 80,000 views on our YouTube content, depending on what videos are doing well, what videos are doing bad, and the YouTube algorithm and all that good stuff. So I only really measure the transition from call to offer. So I think that's what you're referring to here, Adam. Unless you're talking about our enterprise side of things, which I'll come back to in a second. So call to offer. If I'm doing the calls, this is typically a 50% closing rate. People who jump on the call tend to do one call close and pay on the call, right, at a rate of 50%. And then out of the nose, there's another like 20% who end up buying over time. So we end up with an overall rate of 70%. Now, in answer to your question of how many tweaks this took to get there, the answer is not all that many. Now, why is that? It's because I've got decent knowledge of sales, of marketing, of bringing all this kind of from one stage of the funnel to the next and move things on. Intrinsically, extrinsically, just my knowledge from doing so many one-on-one conversations with salespeople, so much training, and so many podcast interviews means that I've been through this process and discussed it and dissected it so many times with so many people that when we implemented it about a year ago, all this fell into place and worked pretty well. Now, there are a few tweaks in the emails that we do, and I use that number that you mentioned earlier on. I'll send 100 emails before I make any judgment as to whether it's a strong email, weak email, whether it sucks, and whether it needs replacing or not. Because sometimes what you're going to find is, out of your 100 emails, you're going to go, well, I only get a 10% open rate on them, which sucks, but out of those 10%, 50% of people who opened them ended up on a call or ended up getting an offer or ended up signing up to the product. So you've got to have a decent number of opens, people breaking through the subject line and opening the email, people breaking through the email copy and taking action or not taking action, because you need to work out whether deals come in on the back of it. And that's what we're here for, right? We're here to close deals. We're not here to send emails that stroke people's ego and make people feel good. And sure, we want to send insights within the emails. We want people to be excited when an email from us hits their inbox. We want prospects to be excited when we call them. If I called a bunch of people who are going to listen to this and watch this YouTube video, I'm sure people would be excited to talk to me. There's no point in doing it if we're not going to generate revenue from it. I get paid commissions on salesman.org revenue. I'm sure you get paid commission on closed deals as well, not leads generated. Unless you're an SDR, in which case this is a slightly different conversation. So there you go, Adam. Hopefully that is useful, mate. If not, jump in the community over at salesman.org and Sell Made Simple Academy. Drop me a message. Okay, what else do we have? Alan, I appreciate you, mate. Is that like 10 minutes of a looping music in the background, mate? I apologize about that. There we go. That's why these shows are awesome to do live. Michael asks, where are we? Michael asks, how do you think the attack on Ukraine will affect the markets, buying journeys, etc., people in Europe? right this second, probably no difference. It's like when COVID first started, everyone just ignored the implications of it, right? It's probably not going to make much difference at all. But in the not too distant future, there's going to be gas pipeline issues. There's going to be political issues. There's going to be sanctions on Russia. Russia are going to be retaliating with different things as well. In Europe, if you're in, so I'm in the UK, right? Up in beautiful Leeds, in God's country of Yorkshire, nothing's going to change for the next like 3-4 months, right? Fuel prices might go up, things like that, sort of things like that. But who knows what can happen on the back of it. So I'd say, Michael, get your head down, earn some cash, get it out of your mind. It doesn't affect you. I know Michael's in the UK. It doesn't affect you right now. Just like COVID didn't affect the majority of people for 6 months until the hysteria kicked off and it reached the UK after being in Wuhan in kind of months and months before it got to the UK. Get your head down, make some money, batten down the hatches just because we don't know what's coming down the pipeline. Make some money, mate. Get it in the bank. And yeah, unless you're part of the Russian oligarchy, mate, and you're sat on a few billion that's probably been seized or frozen right now, you're probably okay. Get out your mind. It just doesn't affect you being in the UK right this second if you're working in sales. And yeah, start crushing your quota, mate. Michelle asks, I love all the frameworks in the training. Some of them have really hit home and changed the way I sell. But what framework that you teach? What framework in the academy that you teach is most important in your opinion? Okay. Can I pull up the academy and I'll show you? I've got one in mind, right? So this is Sell Made Simple Academy. You sign up, you go for an assessment. The assessment then customizes your training plan. So I think if we go to the storytelling workshop, I think this is something this is fundamentally sales, right? You need to be able to send an effective cold email. You need to be able to pick up the phone, make an effective cold call as part of a cadence. I don't want you just spamming cold calls to a massive list, right? But all of that is based upon this premise, which I'll show you in this framework. Michelle, you might not have got to this yet. I know you're relatively new to Selling Made Simple Academy, and this is one of the later trainings. And it's later because I want people to get the fundamentals down before we get into this and more the psychology of sales. But this idea of storytelling and taking people from one place to another, right, is incredibly valuable. It's incredibly important, and it's something that's overlooked. A lot of salespeople think that it's product features and benefits and matching those features and benefits with what the buyer says that they need, but that's logical. If I go into a deal and say, hey, you spend $3,000 with us, we'll train your reps and you're going to get 50 grand out the other side, it seems like a no-brainer. Yet, until you put in some of these elements of storytelling, the sales process just goes dead in its tracks. We get into this idea of status quo, things break down. I'll show you that in a second if you like as well. But yeah, if I pull this up here. So this is the storytelling framework. What we're doing here is taking people from the current reality on the, everything's reversed for me as I look at the screen now. So hopefully this makes sense. The current reality on the left of the screen, hopefully it's your left as well. And then to the right in the future reality, we're going beyond just logic, right? We're taking them from, hey, I think I'm here. I think this is my issue. You're going to go in and consult with them and say, well, you think your issue is this, but I've seen this a million times before. You think that it's a lack of discipline in your sales team, which is the issue. The reality is your onboarding sucked. Nobody's on the same path. No one's on the same track. What I talked about earlier on in the live chat, this idea of the scientific method, this feedback loop is not in place. And so no one is moving forward within the sales process and no one's feeding back into their own success. So that might be the current reality that the buyer is really living in. Then we're going to move on to the next step, which is really diving into the unresolved pain of the buyer. We're not just going to allow them to go, oh, well, I don't need to solve this. We're going to start projecting things forward. Hey, what happens to you in your sales career as a sales leader if your team still continually have really terrible onboarding and this starts to spiral out of control? What happens when half of your sales team leave over the next 18 months for just fair reasons and then reasons beyond your control as well? And so you just onboarded 50% of your staff with no sales process, you think it's no discipline, but they've got no sales process. They don't know what they're doing. They've got no motivation. what happens then? Well, your career is on the line, right? So we're going to, in the world of copywriting and marketing, we call this agitating the pain, right? They've got a slightly sore knee. We're going to run over and just boot it or smash it and really enhance the pain that they're in. So the emotions start to get sparked now at this point. Then, of course, if the pain was so bad and we can agitate the pain to make it worse, they would solve the problem, the prospect would. They would solve the problem if they could break through their barriers. If they could get to the other side and they could resolve the pain themselves, they would. So there's obviously something stopping them. And this is what our product or service likely can help with. This is what we can help with as a consultative layer on top of our product or service. So we call these blockers. This is the status quo. I can touch on some of these in a second if you like. We can run through them. And then we've got to really big up, brighten, make vivid this future reality that we want them to move towards, because we want them to have success. We want them to win on the back of working with us. Now, the cool thing is, and this is what a lot of salespeople get wrong, a lot of salespeople think that they're the hero in the story. They're the person that's going to take them from one side to the other. Well, that's not the case. The hero of the story is the buyer, right? We're the guide. If Frodo is the one who's going to get the ring and whatever he did, dissolve the ring in Mount Doom or Mordor, wherever it was. Well, that's the buyer. They've got to do the work. They've got to do the long journey from one side of the world to the other to get rid of that ring, to be the hero, right? We're the Gandalf in the story. We're going to guide them. We're going to help them. We're going to support them. As you see in that top image there, we are going to help them bridge the reality from one side to the other. We're the one with the shield who's going to take all the arrows, and we're the one that's going to drag the hero from one side to the other. And when you start thinking about sales like this, and this is why I love this framework, and this is why, in answer to your question, Michelle, it's my favorite framework in all the training and all the frameworks that we teach. When you're able to do this, you can take people through a super long, complex, just laborious sales cycle. You can take them from one side to the other with a single conversation. You can get people, and the science backs this up, and it's cliche to say at this point as well, but you can get people to buy into your product service, everything that you do with emotion, then justify the purchase with logic. I'm sure you've been there as well, right? I wanted this new MacBook, right? Emotionally, I wanted the new, coolest, fastest MacBook. Logically, I was like, wow, I probably don't really need it. So emotionally, I was like, right, okay, it'd be cool to have, I like having the latest technology, all this kind of stuff, all the emotional things that make no difference. The business is going to buy it. It's not my own money. And so that's the first logical way of justifying it, right? Next logical thing is, well, if I get this, I can perhaps get rid of the other two computers that we have in the office and my home office, and I can just carry this back and forth. Solves a bunch of problems, simplifies things. So there's a bit of logic. And the more and more logic gets piled on, and I've already made the decision to buy it. I was already going to spend like $3,000 or whatever it was to make the purchase. And I'm now adding logic on the top of all this. And that's what happens when you use this framework, right? You start off with the current reality, the logical place. A lot of salespeople start talking about return on investment, and we can solve this feature will solve this problem. This benefit will solve this. I can come in and help with this. Great, fantastic. But if the buyer doesn't have a big, bright, bold future reality with it, they're dying to get towards, which is me buying the newest, greatest Apple product, then there's no way that the deal is going to go through, because they're going to end up with all the status quo that's going to stop them from moving forward. Now, what stops people moving forward? So here you can see I'll just here's some free content from our paid training program. You have blockers. So there's two main blockers: the status quo, which can be broken down further, and then you've got the fact that the buyer just gets lost. The status quo can be selection overwhelm. And there's just so many different products in the marketplace. If you're selling some kind of sales automation tool, there's like 50 different sales automation tools. Some cost 10 grand a month, some cost 50 quid a month. And a lot of them do the same frigging things between them all, right? So as a buyer, you go, well, I could get this and there's that. And then you speak to one salesperson who's pulling you one way, another salesperson is pulling you another way. There's marketing that you like one way or another. Your boss is saying you've got some budget, and the selection overwhelm becomes too great, and so you don't take action. This is one of the steps of status quo. You've got confirmation bias, which is when you say, hey, I don't need this, even though maybe you do, but because you've committed to that state, that standing, it's very difficult then for your brain to unwire itself and choose a different one. Stories, emotions help push people through this. You've got blowback risk, which is the risk of, hey, I've just invested 20 grand in this new piece of sales software, and I might get sacked if it's a waste of money. You know, my boss is going to be on my back. There's all kinds of issues, and yeah, that's the idea of blowback risk. And then there's the initial cost of change, which I've covered this on the show before, but I'll show you again. This is incredibly valuable for salespeople. If you can get your head around this, this is why a lot of buyers just don't make purchasing decisions, right? So here we've got time. Here we've got pain. The buyer might be a level 3 of pain. We know if they start using our product, we can get them down to a level 1 of pain. The issue is, and this is what salespeople at best forget to mention, at worst, from a manipulative perspective, choose not to mention. There's always an increase in pain before a massive reduction in pain for the buyer. Why is this? Why does pain go to a level 4 before it continues down to a level 1? Well, the buyer's got to find the budget to work with you, right? They've got to, if they're the champion in the account, they've got to do a load of meetings and push for your product or service. If they're not, they've got to get on the champion's back and help them facilitate the deal. They're doing a lot of selling on your behalf. There's the risk of blowback, which we just touched on earlier. If the deal goes to absolute shit, then they're going to look like a right idiot. There's a bunch of ways, many more than what I just described there, where the pain has to go up. Almost 100% of B2B deals is a little bit more pain. You've got to onboard the product. You've got to train people. You've got to convince other people, your end users, to go from one thing to another. This pain has to increase before you get down to the reduction in pain that the product or service provides. Right? So that is another element. Where are we? That's another element of status quo. And then you've got the bigger, broader category here, but the buyer just gets lost. It's all of these all bundled up together, and the buyer just goes, well, it's just too much stuff. I might just forget all this. I'm just going to show up to work tomorrow. I'm going to keep my head down, and hopefully I don't need to do anything. These are all blockers that the typical B2B buyers have. If you're selling to consumers, they have the same steps in the framework, but they're going to have different issues that they need to deal with. It might be that their husband or wife doesn't agree with what they've bought into. It could be that they need financing to get the deal done rather than paying like in cash in a capital purchase or a subscription model in modern kind of B2B SaaS enterprise level deals. So yeah, I think you can see we in the training, we get you to go through these different worksheets and type your answers in, and we get you to practice all of this. So to answer your question, Michelle, that's my favorite framework. Dead simple. Storytelling. And if you can implement this in every other part of the sales process, if you start your sales conversations at one end and you progress down throughout the other end of the sales process, to the other end, you're going to dramatically increase not just the quality of your conversations, but the chances of converting people from prospect to customer. Because again, the goal is to get them to understand the emotion, raise their own levels of emotion, and then justify the deal with logic after the fact. There we go. Whew, slightly out of breath. That was a long question. So that's it for the Seller Made Simple Academy questions. I'll now dive into questions we've got from you guys watching live. Alan, I appreciate you, mate, pointing out the loudness of the music. I can see it on the screen up there, but I just ignored it, and there we go. Didn't ignore it, per se. I didn't see it and didn't act on it when I should have. Joey asks, what have been your 5 favorite sales books? Joey, this might be the most common question asked on these live chats of all time. Unfortunately, most sales books suck. Like, not even that they just are bad. A lot of them are just terrible advice. So I don't really recommend sales books. I usually have a couple that I recommend lying around here. I'll answer your question in a slightly different way. My favorite books that I've read recently, so these are non-sales books, but are super specific to, or can specifically help sales professionals. The 80-20 principle, right? I mean, it's like 25 years old at this point. I bought it on paperback, didn't read it like 10 years ago. I started a few weeks ago listening to the audiobook. I've since bought it on Kindle and I'm rapidly going through it. And in the hyper-connected world that we live in, where you can reach out to a prospect in a billion different ways, and as we talked about at the top of the show, this idea of the scientific method of we need to find the ways that work and refine them over time. As we start to, as all of this becomes more and more of a burden on literally the brains of salespeople, all the options, all the different sales tools, that the fact that your boss wants you to do one thing, but they've not sold anything in the past 20 years either. So they're asking you to do these weird ways of selling that just don't work anymore because they've not got they're not in the game. The 80-20 principle is incredibly powerful, and this book goes beyond my expectations of the book in explaining it and helping you implement it in work, in business, and in life as well. It's a great book. If you're unfamiliar, the 80-20 principle is that 20% of the effort leads to 80% of the results, right? 20% of the people own 80% of the wealth. And it's probably even more so, like 3% of the people own 97% of the wealth in the world, right, in reality. 20% of the sales activities you do deliver 80% of the buying results that you receive towards the end of the year, end of the quota. Incredibly powerful stuff. I recommend that book. Another book that I'm really hot on at the moment. Maybe you can see the trend of this. The goal of this year for me over at salesman.org and Selling Made Simple is to simplify everything that we're doing. We're doing too many things. A lot of it was kind of working pretty well. But as I narrow things down and simplify, we're now doing more of the things that work very well with less effort, which is incredibly powerful, right? So another book I would recommend on this front is Essentialism by Greg Mccowan. I had, and I've mentioned him a bunch of times now, I mentioned him on a podcast the other day as I was talking about this exact subject, right? Poor Greg Mccowan. I'd read the book. He came on the podcast. He's, sold millions of copies of his book. He's a decent-sized guest for us, and it was a terrible interview because I didn't quite grasp what he was trying to share with me. So I reread the book just before Christmas this year, just gone, and incredible book. The idea of, if I can pull up the whiteboard, I'll show you his main premise in a diagram. And when I understood this diagram, it changed my levels of productivity massively, right? So what most people do, salespeople especially, is they do some social selling. They don't like cold calling, so they only do a little bit of that. They love the idea of scaling email cadences, so they do lots of that, right? And then they do this, and then they're doing these reports that nobody actually reads and cares about. They've got to do the mileage, and they've got to do their own accounts. And this is the average salesperson. So this is as far as they get, right? So if you imagine this bubble of success, that's all they get out of it. Versus if you follow Greg Mccowan's kind of the way he describes things, an essentialist, somebody who focuses on the essential and drops everything else, I'll put assess. They do this, right? They know that they are great with email cadences. So they get rid of cold calls, they get rid of LinkedIn, they just stop doing the accounts within their organization and let someone else pick up the slack. They stop doing their mileage reports if they're a field salesperson. They stop doing all this other nonsense, right? And the results that they have, because they're not doing all this other crap, leads to such a massive level of success that none of the other stuff that they've left behind matters anymore. And I've experienced this in B2B sales as well. I was so rubbish for keeping on top of my mileage, right, in my last job. And I'd have the accounting team every month pestering me for the mileage, and I just didn't do it. I didn't care. In hindsight, there's lots of tax implications because I had a company car, right? There's lots of tax implications to not doing the mileage. So I should have been doing the mileage. But all the little stupid sort of stuff like that, I just didn't care about. End of the year, beat quota, it's all forgiven, no one cares about it. And if I hadn't focused on what I was there to really get paid to do, which is beat quota, and I'd focused on all the little crappy stuff that salespeople get bombarded with day after day, I wouldn't have beat the quota, and so all the other stuff wouldn't have mattered because I would have got sacked. So that's where we are. This is the idea of Essentialism. Great book from Greg Mccowan. Okay, hopefully that helps. If not, search on salesman.org, click the little magnifying glass at the top of the page, and just search books, and there's tons of book lists and other things on there for you. Right, I'll answer a few more because my actual mouth is sore from talking, right? I've done like 3 sales calls this morning, 1 enterprise, 2 individuals who wanted to get signed up to Seller Made Simple Academy. Yeah, because I'm back in the trenches now. Our team can't keep up all the calls of you guys wanting to sign up to the program and mentoring and training program. Right, I've recorded 5 videos because Alex, our wonderful writer, is doing an amazing job at helping me script out all the content now so it can come out faster and more furious over the next few months as we ramp up our YouTube videos and all that content as well. And then this live chat. Then I've got another few videos to record. So my actual face and cheek are killing me. So I'll do a few more questions and I'll wrap up with that before I start to lose my voice. Okay. What do we have? Neelam asks, my client doesn't value me. Why am I saying the value thing? Well, my company has a monopoly in the marketplace. How can I act? What to say so that I can have, and what can I say so I can have the upper hand in my deals? Right. If you've got a monopoly, so the buyer's coming to you regardless, why do you care if they don't value you? Is this an ego thing? In which case the buyer's looking down at you? Probably because they're annoyed that you sell for a company that has a monopoly on the marketplace. Then just get rid of that ego, right? Go in, do the deal, be professional, come out. Some buyers are just idiots, right? Who cares? Get the cash, save up, retire early, buy a boat, do whatever you want to do. If it's not an ego thing and it's affecting your deals that you are able to put together, perhaps they are just trying to beat you down on price and things like that, I would, again, look a little bit inward here, Neelam. What are you bringing to the table other than this product that the buyer can't buy anywhere else? Are you adding a level of consulting? Are you going through what I've just described, like kind of 10 minutes ago, this idea of helping the buyer understand where they are right now and this big, brighter, bolder future reality that they could live in, and then you being the vehicle to get them from one side to the other over these reality blockers that we just touched on, status quo, the feeling of overwhelm, things like that. If you're not in a position to do all of that, then again, I'd look inward at, hey, how can you be of service to this person that's probably going to buy from you anyway? How can you take your ego out of it? And if at that point they're being a pain in the ass, then you just need more people coming into the top of the funnel, right? If you've got enough, here's your funnel. If you've got enough people coming in the top to bring out enough coming out at the bottom to hit your sales quota, and one of these people is a real idiot and they get on your nerves, just sack them. Doesn't matter. Maybe you need to get another like 3 or 4 prospects in the top of the funnel to get someone else to replace them. But your sales job shouldn't necessarily be fun, right? We all have to do things that suck on occasion, but it shouldn't be a massive grind for you, especially not if you're selling a product which is monopolized within a marketplace and the buyer has to come to you regardless. I'd have a think about that. Fix your ego if you're being a wimp and it's bothering you, even though you're taking money from this prospect and you're delivering value and you're taking commission. Just take the commission. Who cares? Suck it up, right? Number 2, try and level the playing field a little bit by adding a more consultative role to what you're doing. What value can you add? Are you really solving this buyer's problem? They might be just so annoyed that they have to buy from you and there's no one else to buy from if you're selling within a monopoly that they're like, oh, this person's an idiot. All they've got to do is offer me these 3 things and they're only offering me 2 of them. So see if there's more value you can offer the buyer. And then 3, just get rid of them. Sack them. If they're an idiot and they're making your life a bit of a misery, they're talking down to you, anything like that, add 3 or 4 new prospects to your pipeline, get rid of that idiot, and there you go, rocking and rolling. You've not got time. You've not got time for messing around. This conflict in Ukraine is a real eye-opener to me and should be to everyone else that we could be on the brink of a nuclear war, not necessarily this conflict, but at any moment with anything that's going on. And so to spend time with people who are idiots, and you understand what I mean by an idiot, someone who's looking down the nose at you, someone who's purposefully trying to annoy you, and upset you, whatever it is, you need to just get rid of them out of your life. None of us live long enough to put up with any of that crap. Okay, hopefully that helps. Drew asks, Will, appreciate the content. When working from a list, how many prospects would you have on that list? And what would a cadence generally look like in the B2B space? Too many, you keep saying suspects. Do you mean prospects? Is that an autocorrect thing? That's a weird way to describe your potential customers. Too many, I'll say prospects. Too many prospects could decrease the follow-up quality. Thoughts? Thanks. Drew, you are correct, sir. I'm not trying to plug it, but it's just a good example. I'll just bring up the Cadence workshop here in the Selling Made Simple Academy. So I want you to think of your cadence as being modular. So it doesn't have to have one step. It doesn't have to have a million steps. This is what your cadence should look like. A series of plays, which are a grouping of activities. So it might be, and I'll give you an example of what we do at Sell Made Simple Academy in a second, but it might be that to get someone on the phone, you've got one cadence, and then to get them to close the deal on the back end of this, you've got a different cadence, right? If you're working from a list, I'd want to sub-segment that. We'll start from the basics. If you need to close 10 deals this year to crush your quota, then, and there's 1,000 people in the marketplace, then there is no, every cadence is bespoke to the individual account, right? I'm going to have a list. Maybe I'll break that down to 25 prospects for each quarter, and I'm going to personally write to them. There's going to be no automation. I'm going to have a cadence as in day 1, I do this, day 3, I do this, day 7, I do this, day 14, I do that. But every piece within it is not going to be automated. I'm not going to use a tool. Maybe I'm going to use a spreadsheet to track some of it. But if you need to close 1,000 deals, let's break it down. Let's say you've got to close 250 deals, 1 deal a day, which is the other extreme of this end, right? Then you're going to have to do some automation. You're going to have to really get these cadences down to be effective. So it depends on how many deals you got to close, the deal size that you're doing, and your sales quota. Right. What would a cadence generally look like in the B2B space? So here you see play 1. So for me, selling to the enterprise, selling Sell Made Simple Academy from 2 seats to 50 to 100 seats to technology companies. Who do we have in recently? We've had a builder recently, a big building company here in the UK who are selling commercial buildings. They've got a team of, I think it's like 27 people they got signed up with in the end. The cadence for that, once they're identified as a prospect because they've been through some of our content and they put their hand up, it's an inbound lead. The cadence to get them on a call, to do our discovery call, which I alluded to earlier on, this process of understanding where they are, where they want to be, get them from one side to the other, is pretty simple. They put their hand up and I email them going, hey, you seem like a good fit. Do you want to jump on a call? That's day 1. Day 2 is a call from me. If they don't answer, immediately call back straight again. If they don't answer again, voicemail, then an email referencing the call that I just made. Day 5 is somewhat automated in that it's, hey, here are some insights that we know from your space, your industry, your customers. Here's how that, basically the emails, here's how the insights from your industry ties with our knowledge, our database. Having 10,000 people go through our sales code assessment. We know salespeople need to do this, this, and this. Are your sales reps assertive? Are they capable of setting goals? Are they people pleasers? Are they this? Are they that? And then I think there's an email on day 7. I ring them on day 10. There's an email on day 14. And at that point, if they were an inbound lead, they put their hand up to say they were interested. And they go through all of that. They're not interested. It's not the right time. It's not the right place. Something else has cropped up. We get so many inbound leads that I've not got time to spend chasing up these individuals. So then they go on to just a long cadence of 1 email every week with an insight that we've learned about salespeople for sales leaders. So that's what a cadence should look like. A group of activities. You never want to just we call it a one touch. It's rare that you want to just one touch a prospect. You want to call, voicemail, email. You want to add them on LinkedIn, send a message, send an email saying that, hey, we just connected with you on LinkedIn. Love to follow along or look forward to you accepting my LinkedIn request. You want to group together these different activities and turn them into plays and then just extend your plays out. And at a certain point, once you've been through, we'll go back to the 80-20 principle. At some point, you're going to have had 80% of the leads for 20% of these plays, and then you can just cut it off there, and these are no longer qualified prospects, and they probably never qualified in the first place. So, hopefully, that helps. Jack Jones asks, do you lean towards preferring longer sales cycles for higher value deals or more of a paid POC model to get clients in the door? I'm not sure what POC is. You can drop it in the chat, Jack, if you want me to dive into it further. But I think for B2B sales, the future of the career that we live in, right, is all long. It doesn't have to be a long deal cycle, but it has to be a large deal size. Small deal sizes, we sell training from kind of $3,000 to $5,000 to individuals to companies, and it's just one quick call. People sign up on the call, right? So if you're gonna do that, if you're trying to compete against me and I'm doing a one call close and people are happy to get signed up on the call, people don't even want the call. We use the call to qualify the prospect to make sure that they're a good fit for our training as much as anything else, right? If you're trying to compete with me, doing that, because you got to understand that the prospect hasn't just randomly come across us from an advert. They've listened to 6 months of podcasts. They've watched 15 YouTube videos. They've been through our blog. They've done this, this, and this. If you're trying to compete with, because that's a small deal size, right? $3,000 to $5,000. If you're trying to compete with me on that, you're never going to be able to compete. You're never going to be able to do outbound prospecting as effectively as I can do outbound marketing, generating these inbound leads. So that can all be done. And these calls that we do, these diagnosis calls, I can train anyone to do it. It's not rocket science. There's a step-by-step process. There's a framework. There's essentially a script that you can go through. I can teach anyone to do that. That's not the place you want to be living. You want to be living in a place where it's very difficult to be trained to do these jobs. And that is massive deal sizes, 50 grand up, ideally 100 grand, 200 grand, these enterprise size deals, or SaaS model deals where it's 5 grand every month for the next 7 years, however long they use the product, and you're getting a commission on each one of those every single month. That's what you want to be leaning towards, because that's where you're going to make money, and that's where it's going to become very difficult for AI, junior salespeople, SDRs, whatever it is, to replace you. You want to be in a position where it's difficult for you to be replaced, because that's where you have value, right? Your intrinsic value to the organization is, if we sack Jack, we're going to have to hire 3 people to replace him. So let's pay him double the salary. He's happy. We're happy. Everyone's happy. So there you go. A couple more. Alan Hall asks, have you used Robert Cialdini's, the book's called Influence Techniques in Sales? Yep. Some of them are a bit weird. If you start using the law of reciprocation from Robert Cialdini's Influence, if you start just doing lots of stuff for the prospect over and over and over and over, hoping that you're just going to build so much social pressure that they're going to do a deal with you, well, it's going to work occasionally. It's not going to work very often because of the dynamic between a buyer and a seller at this point in time. And some of what the stigma against salespeople, right, of buyers may look down their nose at you until you get yourself in a position where you can add so much value to them. At distance, at trust, via the fact that you're a known expert in your industry, that you are essentially a micro-influencer in your space, right? So when VPs of sales get on a call with me, and even some of our team at this point, via the trust that is shared via the company that that they spend time with and that they work within, it's a different type of conversation. So if you're coming from this from a perspective of, hey, I'm just going to do so much for the buyer that they're going to have to reciprocate and do a deal with me eventually, you're going to be very disappointed. I did a podcast on Monday with Dr. Robert Glover on this idea of covert contracts, and that disproves this idea of reciprocation within B2B sales. So I recommend checking that one out. But the book is great. Highly recommend it if you want to learn how to not necessarily... I don't like the word influence, don't like the word manipulation. I use a softer touch word when describing all of this in B2B sales. I like to nudge a prospect one way or another, right? Just give them different options and say, well, if you go that way, you're going to get this. If you go that way, you're going to get that. Right. Nalim says, yes, ego of mine. Nalim, you need to do some work on yourself then. It's your own ego, as I talked about earlier on. What else do we have? Michael Scott asks, Will, I work for an early stage startup that's been forced into a lot of proof of concepts. I'm now trying to convert those, but I wasn't around when those first started. Any tips, tricks, recommendations on how to convert these customers? Okay. You need to go in immediately and spend zero time with anyone you've done a proof of concept with. that hasn't been qualified by yourself. So we've got our own qualification framework over at Selling Made Simple Academy, but you can use BANT, you can use Medic, you can use MedPick. If you search, if you head over to salesman.org and click the magnification icon in the corner and type in Medic or MedPick, we've got guides on there for those two frameworks. You need to understand whether these are actually qualified buyers or whether they're people where you had what I just described a minute ago, a people-pleasing salesperson go in and go, oh yeah, we can do that, we can do that, we can do that, even though there was no chance of any budget coming your way regardless anyway. So you need to qualify heavily, especially if you're not the person who implemented these proof of concepts with potential prospects or potential customers. You need to go and suss out whether they are actually potential customers or whether they are just people taking advantage of you and stealing ideas, and just happy to have different conversations with salespeople. Okay, I think we will wrap up there. Oh, I did see this. Okay, so how do I share this? Because this might be, I'm here for salespeople, right? I work with a lot of VPs of sales, CROs, CMOs, chief marketing officers, people like that. Founders of small companies who've got sales teams of 20 to 50 people. But I don't really care about them. I care about you guys, Sales Nation, having success, right? People within the training product having success. And I go out above and beyond what other people in this space will do to make that happen. So I saw this story, but I've not read this post. Can I just pull this up on my iPad? I don't know if I'm going to be able to. If not, I can just read it from the screen. Thank you, Lucy, for bringing this up. Because this is actually, and this is all alleged, right? But it's pretty disgusting if like a third of this is true. So I'll pull it up. This is a post. I don't know Matthew Provins, but this is sent to me earlier on and I skimmed it. And it's all about this company called Pre-Hired. So you guys in the chat, let me know your thoughts on this and tell me if I'm missing some of the picture, if there's two sides to the story or what. Matthew writes, an Illumi. Matthew's been through this process. He's going to share the real story of Pre-Hired, a bootcamp which sells aspiring SDRs the dream of a career in tech, but often leaves them in debt, jobless, and unable to break a $30,000 contract. The founder of the company is suing 290 graduates, many without jobs or making a fraction of what was promised because of their inability or unwillingness to forfeit 12.5% of their salary, of their wages, for a pre-recorded video series and predatory mentorship for people with little to no sales background. So I think the idea of Pre-Hired is, hey, we'll train you for free. We'll do our best to place you in a job. And if you get in the job and you start having success, we're going to take this 12.5% of your salary until we get to a certain point, and then you've paid off essentially your debt to us. You do not need to, coming from a person, an individual, right? My livelihood is based on sponsorships of content to a large degree, but the majority of our revenue over at salesman.org comes from training, right? And I'm the first to say, you can get pretty freaking far in sales without any paid training whatsoever. We put out so much content at salesman.org that if you had the time and the energy and you wanted to piece together what you needed to do to understand the marketplace, to get in front of customers, to explain your value and become the person who can implement all of this, which is our 4-step sales training process, right? Understand your market, get in front of buyers, explain the value, and then the mindset side of things, become the person who can implement all of that. You can get 80, 90% of what we teach from just our free training. Never mind all these mega corporations. Gong, HubSpot have amazing free training. LinkedIn have free training. So the idea that you need to pay tens of thousands of dollars, right, to get trained to become an SDR is insane to me. Right? So we'll carry on reading. The worst part is that they calculate your debt based on OTE, not base. Imagine bringing a brand new SDR on your first day of a sales startup, making 35 grand base salary and immediately having to pay off debt based on $70,000. So that's not right. That's a bit, maybe there's two sides to the story, but that seems a bit weird. It's according to our friend Matthew, who I've never met. I'm sure he's a nice guy. He says it's a systematic abuse of new SDRs and doesn't represent the values of the tech community. Now, I can't comment on the values of the tech community because there's a lot of arseholes in there as well, right? The biggest story here is how many reputable SaaS companies partner with Pre-Hired. I don't blame these companies for hiring great salespeople, but they give a bad name to alternative education as a whole, and I don't represent the community. I believe the program started with good intentions, but has since been completely consumed by greed. This is no longer a path to success at Pre-Hired, only a path to success in spite of it. It's time to stand up. Okay, yada, yada. Okay, so it's all a bit weird, right? Obviously, they are kind of an indirect competitor to what we do, so maybe that colors my opinion on some of this. I don't know. I don't think it does. I tried to be as open as possible about our training, our business, our numbers, our revenue, all that kind of stuff, right? You do not need to pay for sales training. You do not need to pay to be trained to become an SDR. If you work for a great company, they will implement a training plan and onboarding plan on your behalf and will help guide you through that process. A lot of companies partner with the SDRs, BDRs, account managers, full-stack salespeople with Sell and Make Simple Academy, and I encourage them to pay for the training rather than get the teams to pay for it themselves for this very reason. You want to work for companies that want to invest into you. And again, to get in debt, to maybe get a job from a company who here Matthew is saying is suing their graduates, because I assume that the graduates are just not wanting to pay back this debt. And, they should pay back the debt. If they took on the debt, if they signed the contracts, unless there was a gun to their head, they should pay back the debt. I think that's fair to say as well. But they get a pre-recorded video series and predatory mentorship from people with little to no sales background. It just seems like a crappy company and you should stay away from them. Again, my view, my opinion may not represent the opinion of the marketplace, but there we have it. So there we go. We'll wrap up on that hot take there. Please feel free to drop any other questions you've got in the chat below this, in the comments below this, when this becomes just a video as opposed to a live session, and I will go through and answer them the best I can. If you're watching this after the fact and you're not watching this live, again, drop your questions in the comments. I'll go through. I'll spend a bit of time this afternoon running through and answering your questions. There we go. Alan says, thanks for the response. Love hearing your ideas. I appreciate you. Jack says, proof of concept. I appreciate you, mate. I appreciate everyone who's tuned in. I appreciate everyone in Sell and Make Simple Academy who makes these live chats possible. And with that, I will jump to the fade to black button and I'll speak with you again around about this time next week.